I remember exactly where I was when I discovered what Charles had done. Standing in my boutique, lavender and lace, arranging a display of hand selected silk scarves I'd imported from Italy. The email notification from our bank appeared on my phone. Confirmation of wire transfer, $127,500. A wire transfer I never authorized. My first thought wasn't panic, it wasn't even anger, it was a strange cold clarity. Because despite what my husband believed, this wasn't a surprise. This was confirmation. I'm Audrey, and after 13 years of marriage, I'd learned to read the warning signals. The late night whispered phone calls that abruptly ended when I entered the room. The unexplained charges at restaurants where we'd never dined together. The sudden password changes on his devices. 3 months earlier, I'd found a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket while doing laundry. The Palms Resort, a luxury hotel downtown, on a night when he'd told me he was working late. When I confronted him, Charles laughed it off. It was a business dinner that ran late. The receipt must have been someone else's that got mixed up with my papers. I smiled and nodded. Then I began to plan. That evening, I'd opened a separate bank account at a different bank across town. I began systematically moving small amounts of money, nothing that would trigger suspicion, just enough to build a safety net. I documented every unexplained expense Charles had made over the past year, every late night, every lie. Our joint savings account, the one Charles had just emptied, contained exactly enough money to keep him from growing suspicious about my redirected funds. Not our full savings, just enough to make him think he'd won. My phone buzzed with a text from Charles. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Jessica and I are flying to Aruba tomorrow. I've left you enough to get by until you find something smaller. I'll call about the divorce when I get back. Jessica, his 24-year-old assistant, the one who'd giggled at all his jokes at the company Christmas party, the one who'd looked at me with poorly concealed pity, as if I were already obsolete. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I called my lawyer, Patricia, whom I'd consulted weeks ago when I'd first documented the hotel charges. It's time, I said simply. The papers are ready, she replied. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in Aruba? No rush, I said. Let him think he's won first. Another text from Charles. I know this must be crushing for you, but at 41, you should be grateful for the years we had together. At least you have your little store to keep you busy. My little store, the successful boutique I'd built from nothing, the one that generated more annual profit than his middle management position, the one whose finances I'd carefully kept separate from our joint accounts, despite his repeated suggestions to simplify things by combining them. I smiled, thinking of the certified letters that would await his return from Aruba. Let him enjoy his moment of triumph. 3 more texts arrived in quick succession. I've been planning this for months. Jessica understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. You're always so independent anyway. BTW, I used our joint credit card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift. Perfect. I called the credit card company. This is Audrey Parker speaking. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, Mrs. Parker. Can you identify the charges? 2 first-class tickets to Aruba booked today, hotel charges at the Royal Palm Resort, and I'll need to remove my husband as an authorized user. Do you have documentation of the fraud? Text messages from my husband admitting he used our joint card to book travel with another woman after emptying our bank account. I'll forward them to your fraud department immediately. The representative's professional tone couldn't quite mask her satisfaction as she canceled the charges. Charles and Jessica would arrive at the airport tomorrow to find their tickets invalidated and their hotel reservation canceled. That night in our house, my house since I'd inherited it and kept it in my name despite Charles's repeated suggestions to add him to the deed for tax purposes, I found our wedding album. Charles looked so different then, before his hair plugs and Botox injections, before he started wearing shirts too tight for his softening middle, before he began using slang that sounded absurd coming from a 46-year-old man trying desperately to connect with coworkers half his age. More messages. I already told my family. They agree we simply grew apart. Nobody's fault, really. People change. Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller. Did he truly believe he had any claim to my grandparents' house? Had his ego grown so enormous that he'd forgotten whose name was on the deed? Another text. I know the boutique means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for your half, my half, of my business that I'd conceived, funded, and built myself. While he complained about my long hours and referred to it as my expensive hobby. Oh well. Tomorrow, Charles would learn something about property law and separate assets. But for now, I'd savor the quiet and plan my next move. By next morning, the text messages from Charles had doubled. What the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me! I ignored them and headed to my boutique. I had a new shipment of handcrafted leather bags to unpack, and work doesn't wait just because your husband ran off with someone young enough to be his daughter. Later that day, Charles's mother called. Charles told us everything, Barbara said without preamble, about how controlling you've been, how you drove him away. He says you're being hostile now, causing problems with his travel plans. I put her on speaker while I arranged a window display. Did he mention forging my signature to empty our joint account? Or charging tickets for him and Jessica on our credit card? Silence, then. Well, he said you left him no choice, that you've been cold and distant. Barbara, I have his texts. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he bragged about taking our money? Or maybe the one where he mocked my age? Another pause. He did seem a bit callous. I told him that text message was inappropriate. I appreciate the call, Barbara. I've always liked you, but I think it's best if we end this conversation now. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Charles's family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Already? Her voice had lost its accusatory edge. Goodbye, Barbara. By late afternoon, Charles's sister Megan was spreading the news through mutual friends. Apparently, Charles and Jessica were stuck at a budget motel near the airport, their Aruba dreams temporarily derailed. He'd tried using his personal credit cards, but those had been maxed out for months. Another red flag I'd noticed but hadn't mentioned. My lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet, but he'll get the papers at his new motel address. Speaking of which, his girlfriend's social media is providing excellent evidence. She's been posting about their adventure all day, including some choice comments about you. I smiled, thinking of my own documentation. A year's worth of suspicious charges, hotel receipts, text messages that proved premeditation. Charles had been so focused on his grand escape that he'd never considered I might be watching, waiting, preparing. My phone buzzed with another text. You think you're so smart, but I made copies of all the boutique's financial records. Half that business is mine. I forwarded the text to my lawyer, adding it to the growing file of Charles's mistakes. Let him learn the hard way about separate assets and business ownership. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. The emergency hearing on Monday was everything I could have hoped for. Charles showed up in his new, youthful wardrobe. Designer jeans too tight for a man of his age, a blazer that screamed midlife crisis. Jessica waited outside, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting. My lawyer presented our evidence methodically. Charles's forged signature on the bank withdrawal, his gleeful text about emptying our account, his credit card fraud, his documented history of hidden expenses, each piece carefully collected over months of quiet observation. Your Honor, Charles's hastily hired lawyer attempted. My client admits to some rash decisions, but Mrs. Parker's actions have been vindictive and calculating. My lawyer countered, You mean prudent? My client protected her separate assets and maintained detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive, that's smart business. The judge reviewed my documentation, the separate property deed to the house, the boutique's incorporation papers in my name only, the careful separation of business and personal finances that Charles had always complained about. Mr. Parker, the judge addressed Charles directly, you admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Charles shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing financial fraud? The judge raised an eyebrow. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation shows is clearly separate from marital assets? The business grew during their marriage, Charles's lawyer tried again. My client is entitled to a portion of that growth. The business was established before the marriage, Matatrats, my lawyer interrupted, and Mrs. Parker maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout. We have documentation of every penny invested and earned. I watched Charles's face as reality started sinking in. He thought this would be easy. Empty our accounts, run off with his girlfriend, maybe claim half my business in the divorce. He'd never bothered to understand my insistence on keeping things separate and had mocked my careful bookkeeping as obsessive. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Parker is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Charles protested. We spent it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, the judge cut him off. And, Mr. Parker, the court takes a very dim view of using shared credit cards to fund adventures with paramours. Outside the courthouse, I heard Jessica asking Charles about their Aruba plans. His response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor, heading back to the business he'd never understood or respected. The next few weeks brought a string of increasingly desperate moves from Charles. He tried claiming the boutique had been his idea. He remembered investing money in its early days. He even suggested he'd been my business partner all along, claims quickly disproven by my meticulous records. He's getting desperate, my lawyer observed. Jessica's social media shows they're staying at her studio apartment now. Apparently, living on an assistant's salary isn't quite the glamorous escape he imagined. Charles's family started reaching out, their tone markedly different from their initial accusations. We had no idea, his sister Megan admitted during an unexpected visit to my boutique. He told us you'd been cold and controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw his texts. It's the way he bragged about taking your money, she continued, running her fingers over a silk scarf. That's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother called again, this time in tears. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger, I raised him better than that. I thought I did. I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago, but now it felt like rats deserting a sinking ship. The boutique thrived, ironically boosted by local gossip about my situation. Women started coming in specifically to show support, often leaving with far more than they'd planned to purchase. My ex tried something similar, one customer confided while buying a designer handbag. He thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Charles, his tone swinging between anger and manipulation. You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we work something out? That business would be nothing without my support. I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. Through mutual friends, I heard Jessica was having second thoughts. Apparently, sharing her studio apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't afford his own place wasn't the romantic adventure she'd imagined. The age gap that had seemed exciting during secret hotel meetings felt different in the harsh light of day-to-day reality. She posted vague statements about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes on social media. My lawyer mentioned during an update call that Jessica had removed her relationship status the previous morning. I almost felt sorry for Charles. But then I remembered his forged signature on our bank withdrawal, the laughter in his voice when he told me he'd emptied our account, the casual cruelty of his comments about my age, the way he'd assumed I'd be helpless without him. Instead of pity, I felt something else, pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, in my ability to protect myself while he underestimated me. The final divorce hearing painted a very different picture from Charles's imagined triumph. Gone was his cocky attitude, replaced by barely concealed panic. Jessica was noticeably absent. She'd moved on to a coworker her own age, according to office gossip. Charles had shown up in his old clothes. The designer wardrobe apparently returned to help repay the joint account he'd emptied. His lawyer looked tired, probably from trying to find loopholes in my documented separation of assets. Your Honor, Charles's lawyer attempted one last time. Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business through moral support. Moral support? My lawyer interrupted. Like these text messages belittling Mrs. Parker's business as a little shop? Or these social media posts calling it her hobby? The judge had clearly seen enough. The final settlement reflected my careful planning. I kept my house, my business, and my separate assets. Charles got his personal possessions, his pension, and his car, which was worth less than he owed on it. You've destroyed me, he hissed as we left the courthouse. I'll have to move back in with my parents. No, Charles, I replied calmly. You destroyed yourself. I just protected myself. His mother was waiting outside, ready to drive him to her house, his new home. At 46, the irony of his situation wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd mocked my age was now living in his childhood bedroom while I continued running my successful business. You planned this all along, he accused. You knew this would happen. No, I just paid attention. And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records. His mother stepped between us. That's enough, Charles. You've embarrassed yourself enough already. As they walked away, I heard her start in on him. Honestly, what were you thinking? Forging her signature? Emptying bank accounts? Sending those horrible texts? I watched them disappear into the parking lot, feeling nothing but relief. Charles had thought he was writing the ending to our story with that forged signature and cruel text. Instead, he'd merely set my carefully laid plans in motion. My phone buzzed, not with texts from Charles this time, but with notifications of new orders from my boutique's website. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction he'd imagined. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my boutique had expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Charles struggled to rebuild his life, the little shop he'd dismissed was thriving. I'd hired 3 new employees and launched an online store that was gaining traction nationally. News of Charles's situation trickled back through mutual acquaintances. He'd tried dating apps, but found women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women, having heard about his history through office gossip, steered clear. Jessica had apparently warned her friends about him, sharing screenshots of his desperate attempts to win her back after she'd left. His career suffered too. The company's HR department had launched an investigation into his relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand. The promotion he'd been expecting went to someone else, someone who didn't have a history of inappropriate relationships with assistant staff. He tried to claim age discrimination, Megan told me during another visit to the boutique, saying they were punishing him for dating someone younger. HR just added that complaint to his file. I was surprised to see his sister in my store again, but her presence spoke volumes about how thoroughly Charles had alienated his own family. I know we didn't support you at first, she admitted. He played the victim so well. But watching how he handled everything, how he acted afterward, I'm ashamed we ever believed him. My lawyer kept me updated on Charles's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. Each petition was denied. His claim of unfair distribution dismissed based on the evidence of his own actions. He actually tried arguing that his text about emptying the account was just a joke, she told me, laughing. The judge asked if haha made forgery less illegal. The boutique's success brought unexpected validation. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story, not as a scorned wife, but as a savvy businesswoman who protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs asked for advice about keeping business and personal finances separate. The best protection is preparation, I told one young woman who reminded me of Jessica. And always trust your instincts. Charles's mother called occasionally, usually after he'd done something particularly self-destructive. He'd tried online gambling, hoping for a quick fix to his financial problems. He'd gotten involved with a pyramid scheme that promised fast returns. Each attempt to recover his former lifestyle just dug him deeper into trouble. I don't know where we went wrong with him, she sighed during one call. His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet if he'd just take responsibility for his actions. But he's still blaming everyone else. You, Jessica, his company, the judge. I listened politely but maintained my distance. Their family drama wasn't my problem anymore. My life had moved forward, filled with plans for a third boutique location and a possible expansion into luxury accessories. The only reminder of Charles's impact on my life was a framed copy of the forged bank withdrawal hanging in my office. Below it sat my latest business award, proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening for my third boutique location. The event attracted local media, and the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage. It was about a successful businesswoman expanding her brand. Charles's betrayal had become a mere footnote in my success story. During the event, Jessica unexpectedly walked in. She looked younger than ever. Or maybe I just felt that much stronger. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like a shield. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I believed everything he told me about how you were cold, controlling, how you didn't support his dreams. Then I watched him try the same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough. I continued arranging a display of designer sunglasses. Those weren't dreams, Jessica. They were escapes. There's a difference." "I know that now," she paused, then added, "He tried to move in when you froze the accounts. He thought my studio apartment would be temporary. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the size of my closet and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place, I understood what you meant about the difference between dreams and escapes." I actually laughed. "Let me guess, he had big plans but no way to fund them?" "Exactly. Everything was going to work out once his investments paid off, once he got that promotion, once his cryptocurrency definitely increased in value." She shook her head. "I'm dating someone my own age now. We have student loans and a small apartment, but at least we're building something real." After she left, my assistant manager whispered, "Was that the girlfriend?" "No," I replied. "That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did." Speaking of lessons, I gestured to a young couple examining our designer handbags. "Let's talk about your idea for expanding our accessories line." The boutique had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of independence, of resilience, of the power of preparation. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the importance of protecting their assets. Charles's mother called one last time, not to discuss Charles, but to thank me. "You taught our family an important lesson," she said, "about enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty. Charles is still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems, but we're not defending him anymore. That's your legacy to our family, showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them." I thought about that legacy as I reviewed plans for a fourth location. Charles had intended to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model and take half of everything I'd built. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger, more successful. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Charles filed another petition to revisit the settlement. The judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. Thought you'd enjoy that. I smiled, thinking of him in his childhood bedroom, still trying to rewrite an ending that had been determined the moment he underestimated me. 2 years after Charles's betrayal, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The topic wasn't divorce or betrayal. It was about building and protecting a successful business. My story had evolved from a cautionary tale to inspiration. During the Q&A session, a woman asked about keeping business and personal finances separate. "My husband says I'm being paranoid, that marriage means sharing everything." "My ex-husband said the same thing," I replied, "right up until he tried to claim half my business in our divorce." Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia. The boutique chain had grown to 5 locations, each more successful than the last. The little shop Charles had mocked now employed 30 people and had been featured in several national magazines. Through mutual friends, I heard Charles had finally moved out of his parents' house into a small apartment above a garage. He'd had to take a lower paying job after his former company downsized, eliminating his position during restructuring. His dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though his profile photo was clearly outdated. Jessica, ironically, had become a regular customer at my original boutique location. She'd earned her business degree and started her own social media consulting company. "You inspired me," she told me once. showing how a woman can build something lasting instead of falling for empty promises. I kept Charles's forged withdrawal slip framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. Below it hung a sign that read, "Success is the best revenge." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original boutique, I stood addressing my employees and loyal customers. The space had been transformed from a single, little shop into the flagship store of a thriving business empire. Charles's mother attended, though I hadn't sent her an invitation. She waited until the crowd thinned to approach me. "I saw Charles yesterday," she said, smoothing her designer dress, one she'd bought from my store. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had. He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away." I thought about that forged signature, his casual cruelty, his assumption that I would crumble without him, how he'd expected me to beg, to break, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I'd built something stronger than before. Each new boutique location was a testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure men. The young saleswoman I'd hired last month, coincidentally also named Jessica, came over with a question about the new inventory system I'd implemented. As I explained the process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the store window. I saw what Charles had failed to see 5 years ago. Not a woman getting older, but one getting wiser, stronger, more successful. His forged signature had meant to be an ending. Instead, it had been a beginning. Not just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved better than someone else's midlife crisis.